Back at the precinct, the officers started to feel the heat. Reports of someone investigating their movements had surfaced, and paranoia set in. They began pointing fingers, suspecting one of their own might be feeding information to an outsider. But Marcus wasn't working alone. A trusted informant inside the department had been feeding him intel, and now their identity was at risk. Marcus had no choice but to act swiftly. The deeper he dug, the clearer it became. This wasn't just about him. The entire operation was about to unravel, and if he wasn't careful, so would his cover. As Marcus prepared to confront the officers, he set a plan into motion. Hidden cameras and audio devices he'd planted around the precinct captured every incriminating word. The officers, unaware they were being watched, scrambled to cover their tracks. But just as Marcus was about to reveal himself, the unexpected happened. A high-ranking detective walked in, someone Marcus recognized from the syndicate's files. This wasn't just a corrupt cop, it was one of the syndicate's leaders, operating from within the department. The detective ordered the officers to eliminate any threats, including Marcus. Unbeknownst to them, Marcus's team had already surrounded the precinct. As the officers attempted to leave, agents stormed in, exposing their entire operation. But the final twist came when Marcus confronted the detective. Instead of panicking, the detective smiled. "You've only scratched the surface," they said. Marcus realized this takedown wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of a much larger fight. As the corrupt officers were led away in cuffs, Marcus stood silently, watching the scene unfold. The operation had been successful in exposing the local corruption, but the detective's chilling words lingered in his mind. The files his team recovered confirmed it. This syndicate stretched far beyond this small town. It was a web of power and greed, tangled deep into law enforcement and beyond. Marcus knew his mission wasn't over, but for now, justice had been served. The town could begin to heal, free from the grip of those who abused their authority. As he walked away, the burned remains of his car were a stark reminder of how close he had come to losing everything. But Marcus wasn't one to back down. This was just the first battle, and he was ready for the war ahead. With a quiet resolve, he disappeared into the night, already planning his next move. It was a quiet evening in a small suburban town when chaos erupted. A young black man, dressed in a sharp suit, stood helplessly as two police officers accused him of a crime he didn't commit. Their confrontation escalated quickly, fueled by prejudice rather than proof. The man's pleas fell on deaf ears, and soon flames engulfed his sleek black car, a deliberate act meant to humiliate and intimidate. But what these officers didn't know was that their victim wasn't just any ordinary man. Beneath his calm demeanor and desperate pleas hid a secret that could turn their world upside down. This wasn't just a random attack. It was a spark that would ignite a chain of events, exposing the deep cracks in their justice system. Who was this mysterious man? And how would his true identity change everything? Stick around. The truth is more shocking than you think. As the officers stood by, watching the car burn, the man's face remained oddly composed, too calm for someone who had just lost everything. He seemed to study them, taking in every word, every action. The officers assumed they had silenced him, but they had no idea who they were dealing with. The man's name was Marcus Kane, a name no one in that town would recognize, but in certain circles, it carried weight. Marcus wasn't just a black man passing through. He was a highly skilled federal agent, operating undercover on a case that went far deeper than the officers could imagine. Earlier that day, Marcus had been following leads on a powerful criminal organization tied to corruption within law enforcement. Now, his mission had taken an unexpected turn. The same men who thought they could intimidate him had unknowingly made themselves a part of something much bigger and far more dangerous. As the smoke rose from the wreckage, Marcus quietly walked away, his mind racing but his face betraying nothing. He needed to play this carefully. His cover couldn't be blown. Not yet. He knew the officers had no idea of his true identity or what they had just stepped into. They saw only what they wanted to see, another powerless victim. But Marcus wasn't powerless. He had a mission, and he wasn't about to let their actions derail it. Back at the station, the officers laughed off the incident, boasting about teaching him a lesson. But their arrogance blinded them to the storm that was quietly brewing. Marcus, meanwhile, was already pulling strings behind the scenes. Using encrypted channels, he contacted his team, sharing details of the encounter and demanding immediate surveillance on the officers. What Marcus didn't know was that these officers were connected, deeply connected, to the very organization he was hunting. As night fell, Marcus positioned himself in the shadows, watching the officers from a distance. His team had uncovered something shocking. These weren't just corrupt cops acting on their own. They were part of a larger network tied to a dangerous syndicate that had been evading law enforcement for years. Marcus had been getting closer to exposing them, but now the stakes were higher. They'd crossed a line, and he was determined to make sure justice was served. Inside the precinct, the officers received a cryptic call. The voice on the other end warned them about loose ends and instructed them to tie things up fast. Unease crept in, but they brushed it off, still underestimating Marcus. Meanwhile, Marcus prepared for the next phase of his plan. He wasn't just gathering evidence anymore, he was ready to confront them. As he moved closer to the heart of their operation, the tension crackled like electricity in the air. As Marcus closed in, he discovered something that stopped him in his tracks. The syndicate wasn't just paying off local officers, it had infiltrated higher ranks within law enforcement. Files he decrypted revealed a chilling connection. The very department Marcus had been relying on for backup was compromised. The two officers who burned his car weren't rogue. They were following orders from someone much higher up.